Never Mind the Buzzwords is a community event from Jigsaw Better Business. Taking place bi-monthly, its aim is to build a community of businesses and professionals where you can learn, share, and connect. It's about going beyond the jargon and coming away from each session with knowledge, tangible tools, tips, strategies, and hopefully an extended network. Each event is focused either on people or a process. In the process sessions, we talk about how we deliver value in our business. Topics here include lean tools and thinking, operational excellence, sustainability, and digital transformation. In the people sessions, we look beyond the process to the who, discussing topics like leadership, teams, culture, and professional development. Never Mind the Buzzwords isn't just an event that you attend, it's an event to participate in. So get involved in the conversation, put your camera on if you can, share your thoughts, ideas, or questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. And don't forget to stay in touch. We have a LinkedIn group where we upload resources and recordings from this community. And if you follow Never Mind the Buzzwords on Eventbrite, you'll be notified whenever we post a new event. So you're very welcome to our Never Mind the Buzzwords group, whether it's your first time joining or you've been here a few times. My name is Julie. I'm the Head of People Development with Jigsaw Better Business. I'm a organisational psychologist. So my aim is kind of to improve how people experience work. As we go through today, we'll have, prompts for you to put things into the chat. Absolutely welcome your input, any questions or comments or experiences that you'd like to share. Please just make use of the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. Today we are talking about emotional intelligence and the future of work. So we don't know exactly what the future holds, but we can help ourselves to be ready for it by having these highly developed emotional and social skills. So by the end of this session, you'll hopefully be coming away with a couple of ideas of some of the skills that may be helpful to develop as we adapt to our changing world of work. As I mentioned, you can feel free to unmute yourself at any stage or pop any questions or comments into the chat. Just bearing in mind that we are recording the session, so if you are sharing anything, just share whatever you're comfortable having recorded. But today I'd like to get us started off just by thinking a bit about what the future of work might hold and what kind of skills might help us to manage it. So I'll open it up to you first of all. When you visualize your workplace in the future, maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, we don't need to think too far ahead, but even just a few years down the line, what do you think the future of work might look like? So pop it into the chat, or if you'd like to put in any comments, if you'd like to unmute yourself, that's fine as well. Um, of course, it's difficult to predict this exactly. There's been so much change happening, and that's likely to continue. I'm sure that, the next decade will be no different in terms of all the change that we've been going through, but pop into the chat there. Matthias, yeah, really good point. Increased autonomy for employees. Yeah, I think a lot of, companies are seeing that employees want that bit of autonomy. Ted, you're saying, yeah, increased use of artificial intelligence and bots. Yeah, absolutely. So again, we've obviously seen that coming in already. Self-directed work, Stuart, absolutely. Yeah, Alberta, good to see you. That's a really good point. Yeah, no more 9 to 5 or just, less kind of rigid in terms of this is the schedule. So it's not just you have to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Yeah, so a bit more flexibility. Martin, that's a really good point. Asynchronous collaboration, right? So you're working with people who maybe they're in different time zones, or like Alberto said, maybe they don't work the typical 9 to 5. So you're collaborating with them without being face to face or without, physically communicating with them in real time. Alison, good to see you as well. Increased remote work and reliance on technology, absolutely. Dervla, yeah, paper free. 100%. Like it's so, a lot of companies are becoming much more aware of the imprint that they're leaving on the world, in terms of paper or carbon or whatever else. And Rishi, that kind of ties in with, working with a sustainable mindset. So yeah, that kind of ties in there. Hybrid work is here to stay. I'd probably agree with you, Ted. Yeah, I think you know, if people are coming into an office, there kind of has to be a good reason for it now. And Katrina, good to see you as well. Flexibility and sustainability, definitely. Modified office with huge focus on modernizing technology to keep up with the increased exposure online from Chris. Absolutely, yeah. So really kind of adapting the workplaces to focus to suit that. And a focus on workplace wellness, Matthias. Yeah, definitely. I think we're seeing a lot more of that. People becoming more aware that, it's not a case of, okay, leave your emotions at the door, leave who you are at the door, when you're coming into work. It's much more taking a full view, kind of holistic view of the person. So yeah, definitely, those are really good um, ideas. So a lot of different things that we might see more of, or maybe see less of in the future. So yeah, those are really good inputs. Thank you for sharing those. Um, so I suppose, yeah, every workplace is going to be a little bit different. Every industry is going to be a bit different. The future of one industry might look very different to another. But yeah, like you mentioned, there probably will be some common themes. One of which being that this rapid pace of change, that has been, that pace of change has been accelerating over the years. And that means that there's a lot of uncertainty, unpredictability. We can't use hindsight to gain foresight, because what happened yesterday isn't necessarily what's going to be applicable today. Um, so we can't kind of rely on what we've always done. It's kind of like trying to drive forward while only looking in your rearview mirror. It's not gonna be the best strategy. Diversity as well. I think we've seen, greater age diversity. People are working longer, greater gender diversity in terms of, say, men and women holding, say, senior leadership positions. Cultural diversity, again, we're kind of, our global economy is sort of shrinking a little bit. We're much more connected with different cultures. There's a lot more globalization. And neurodiversity as well is another one. I suppose not that long ago, people with maybe disabilities were kind of almost hidden away, or they didn't get the support they need. We're not fully there in terms of equity, but there definitely has been changes and in attitudes and in laws. So there's kind of a greater awareness of the benefits of having people, with all different kinds of ways of seeing the world and all different kinds of abilities. As mentioned in the chat, hybrid work probably is here to stay. It's going to be much more common. We can expect that you're not all going to be in the same place at the same time. Someone mentioned asynchronous communication there as well. So we're probably going to be working with people on remote or distributed teams. And automation. I think a couple of people mentioned that, bots, machines, robotics, various kinds of software programs that may make some roles or tasks obsolete. We've kind of already seen that happening. Say, for example, self-service checkouts in the supermarkets mean less need for cashiers to be employed. I saw a video a while ago as well of a restaurant that had automated a huge part of the food preparation. So there were very few chefs that allowed them to sell food for a much lower cost. And I'm sure we can all think of, various tasks that maybe, at the start of your career a number of years ago might have taken days to complete, and now it only takes an hour. So a lot of those kinds of tasks that can be automated are being taken up by with technology. But I suppose what sets us apart then from the machines, what's harder to replace, are those skills that make us uniquely human. It's our social and emotional skills. So we need those we need skills as well to deal with all of this, to deal with rapid and change and a lot of uncertainty, to work with all different kinds of people in different locations, making sure everyone feels equally included, and to set us apart from the tasks that can be taken over by machines or robots. Um, So McKinsey did research on, you know, these really important skills. So again, as we said, that intelligent machines are sort of taking over the more repetitive or physical or more basic cognitive tasks. The skills then that become really important are those social, emotional, and technical skills. So McKinsey found that these were the top skills that companies are trying to recruit for at the moment. So that critical thinking, communication, mental flexibility, teamwork, and self leadership. And in terms of skills gaps that have been identified, that same research by McKinsey found that HR professionals are having difficulty recruiting candidates with those kinds of skills like problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, innovation, and the ability to deal with complexity and ambiguity, and those communication skills as well. A lot of these are so-called, soft skills, but I think they're human skills. They come under that umbrella term of emotional intelligence. Um, and emotional intelligence, again, it's something that I'd say a few different people might have different views or perceptions on. So, would anyone like to pop their thoughts into the chat? What does emotional intelligence mean to you? So again, sometimes it's one of those things that we kind of know it when we see it, or maybe when we don't see it. Um, you signed up to this event, it had emotional intelligence in the title. What thoughts came to mind? It doesn't have to be a exact definition, but what would you, when you see emotional intelligence, what does that mean to you? So Ashling, you're saying self-awareness. Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely a part of it. Empathy. Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of people saying empathy there. The ability to read a situation before reacting. Yeah, exactly. So kind of pausing before responding. How a person reacts or feels emotionally to a change. Exactly. Understanding your own and other people's feelings. Definitely. Empathy. Yeah, Elaine, I like that for yourself as well as for others. So that's sort of self-compassion as well. Understanding another person's perspective, being self aware, able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, how you interact with different people in different situations, definitely. Understand communications without being reactive, absolutely. Able to understand our own emotions and the other ones in the room, and therefore act accordingly. Not to spread yourself too thin when leading numerous teams. Yeah, exactly, Tom. So, kind of knowing your own boundaries and communicating those. So, lots of really good pieces coming in there. Yeah, and again, Matthias, echoing what that piece about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Understanding why they think like they do, respecting another person's opinion. Rather than just assuming. So yeah, those are all really good points, and all absolutely tie into this concept of emotional intelligence. Yeah, Martin, keeping a cool head when others around you are losing theirs. Exactly. Yeah, being able to manage when the pressure is on, and like a lot of people mentioned, not reacting in the moment. Awareness of differences and having an open mind. So those are all really great. Keep them coming in. And I think, hopefully you can kind of see how all of those skills really react or relate to that future of work that we described. All different people dealing with different challenges, brand new challenges. Being able to kind of understand yourself, understand others, not be too reactive in the moment. So these are skills that we are using daily. We have been developing them over years, even if not consciously aware of it. And even if you think back to your teenage self, the smallest things like maybe wearing, not the right kinds of shoes, or, not wearing the same clothes as your friends, or saying something wrong in front of a class might have generated a huge stress response. Whereas now, you might not really recognize it as a stressor. Maybe because you've bigger things to worry about, or because, you've developed the skills to understand and manage your emotions a bit more. So there's, I'm sure we can think of lots of different examples that we've used these kinds of skills in, or maybe when we didn't, those might stick out in our mind as well. Um, Reuven Barron has this definition that it's interrelated social and emotional competencies that determine how effectively we understand and express ourselves, understand others and relate with them, and cope with daily demands. So this really ties in with what everyone was just saying in the chat. Um, Reuven Barron, he was one of the first psychologists to look into emotional intelligence back in the 80s. I think sometimes people think of Daniel Goleman when they hear emotional intelligence. He definitely was around. He published his book in '95. I'd say he was probably just one of the more business savvy ones, that really kind of brought it into the mainstream a little bit more. But this concept has been really extensively researched for, since the 80s. Another definition then is that it's this something that's a bit intangible. It affects how we manage behavior, navigate social complexities, and make personal decisions that achieve positive results. So again, really relates to what each of you were coming up with. And again, it has been extensively researched, and that research shows that these are a really useful set of skills for improving work performance, especially in roles that are socially or emotionally demanding. Now, it's not a panacea. It's not that emotional intelligence is something that will automatically fix or improve every problem or every situation. You do, of course, need your technical skills and your expertise. Your IQ, your personality may play a role in how well you're doing your job, but these skills can really help us improve performance with a lot of tasks.
Sorry, Julie, can I ask a question
Of
there?
course, yeah.
If you were to, if you wanted to increase awareness in the workplace around emotional intelligence, like what is there any recommended readings? I know you mentioned Daniel Goleman there,
Mhm.
but is there any other recommended readings that would be like, we'll say less cumbersome? Do you know what I mean? That would be
Yeah,
an easier read. If could you recommend any that that we
yeah,
could share with the employees?
of course, yeah. And even just on that topic of Daniel Goleman, he has a Harvard Business Review article, which is one of the most widely read articles of, I
Yes.
think it's how to become a leader, or I
Okay.
can't remember the title now, but I can share it with you afterwards.
Yeah, that'd be great if you
Um,
could. Thanks very
yeah,
much.
no problem. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll send out a few kind of resources, and like that, the more bite-sized, rather
Yeah,
than you have to
exactly.
read a
Bite
book
size.
to
That's
get
the
it.
exact
Yeah,
word.
yeah,
Thanks.
exactly, and TED Talks and things like that. So yeah, no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, the
I'll
TED
send those
Talks
back
are
to you.
very good. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks. Thanks,
Yeah,
Julie.
no worries at all. But yeah, exactly. It is great to be able to bring that awareness into the workplace. Um, but yeah, so and again, like these are all competencies. Sometimes people think of them as, you know, naturally who you are. And yeah, there will be some natural differences, right? Like some people are very naturally caring and empathetic. Some people, they love change and novelty. So they'll be very flexible. They'll be able to adapt. Um, and for some people, maybe that doesn't come as naturally, but that it's just a set of competencies. So again, it's building up habits, and it's kind of building new pathways in your mind of what becomes your default. So if you are thinking, okay, this isn't really for me, or this isn't something I've ever looked at before, I wouldn't say rule it out as something that can never be looked at or never be improved. So there are quite a range of skills that can help us adapt to the future of work. So we said we'd be dealing with a lot of change, uncertainty, a lot of different people that we want to feel engaged and included, interacting with people, with technology, ensuring that we stay human while technology replaces some roles or tasks. So I have just picked 5 skills that I think will be really helpful in dealing with that kind of environment. It's not an exhaustive list, but my kind of top 5 would be, first of all, flexibility. So that's that skill of being able to be adaptable to change or react to change without rigidity. So a couple of people mentioned that in the comments of, that mental flexibility. Empathy, that skill of being able to, as we all said, put yourself in someone else's shoes, in someone else's position, listening to them and really listening just to understand, recognizing how they might be feeling, how they might be thinking. Then we have self awareness as the third one, which is the will and skill to see yourself accurately, and see yourself clearly. So, someone who's quite skilled with this, they're able to recognize their strengths and their areas for development. They know their emotions, they know how they're feeling, they understand their own values. And so, having that awareness. The fourth one, then, problem solving. That's that skill of recognizing that there is a problem, being able to address it, and come up with potentially effective solutions. And in a emotional intelligence context, it's about not letting our emotions cloud our judgment too much. Because sometimes, we might spend more time worrying about a problem rather than trying to solve it. So this is that skill of being able to tackle it and come up with potentially effective solutions. It doesn't have to be a perfect solution. And the fifth one then is optimism. So this is that belief that things will work out. And it's not just kind of blindly, the Irish typical, sure, it'll be grand, brushing it off. But it's actually kind of believing that you have the skills and the resources to deal with problems or to overcome obstacles. Um, so I've identified these five, and I was planning on going through each of them, just identifying why they're important, some of the potential pitfalls or dangers, and some strategies on how to begin to develop these skills. And I will send out a document at the end as well that'll just allow you to kind of summarize all of these. So as I said, these are kind of my top five, but if you have any other ones that you think might be useful, feel free to pop them into the chat. Um, so I'll start with flexibility. As we mentioned, you're going to be dealing with a lot of change and uncertainty, and this is that skill that will allow you to do that. So being flexible means that you can adapt your thoughts, behaviors, and actions to suit the environment. And it'll also help you work well with other people, showing that you're open to hearing about new ideas or willing to adapt something to suit their needs. You don't want to come across as the person who kind of says, it's my way or the highway, because people will then probably resist that. You probably won't build as much of a, good quality, trusting relationship. A potential obstacle here is being seen as too flexible. Maybe this can be perceived as being disingenuous. And the Harvard Business Review have a really interesting article called the authenticity paradox. Um, because, sometimes I think we're hearing a lot of talk about being an authentic leader and being true to oneself. And yeah, that is very important. We want to feel like we're genuine. But then the potential problem is if we rigidly stick to that, and, it can kind of get in the way of developing yourself. Um, so being too flexible and too adaptable, can be a potential problem there.
Yeah, I just on that point, Julia,
Yeah.
it's and that tends to be, I suppose, the employee that is that little bit more flexible at times can end up with more of the more work, I suppose, is the other side of that coin.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because then they will be deemed as the go-to kind of person.
Yeah.
So yeah,
100%. Yeah,
that's
definitely would
something
agree
to
with
be
that.
mindful, I think, of on that as well.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Yeah. So it's that, there's no, I suppose, right answer in terms of exactly how flexible you need to be. But it is definitely a balancing act. It's not just a case of, oh, well, you always have to adapt to your surroundings in every possible way. It's bearing in mind of where you're kind of drawing the line and making sure that you have the flexibility without, completely adapting to what everyone else wants you to do. So that's something to be mindful of if you're developing this skill. And when it comes to developing these skills, again, there's lots of different ways to do that. One is beginning with a bit of, knowing your own preference, knowing, how you like to approach change, right? Because, some people say that in terms of routine, they'll get bored easily. They much prefer variety and novelty. With other people, if there's a bit of change, they'll get stressed or worried. Now, many people are somewhere in between those two examples, but it's just about recognizing, how you usually think and feel about change, what kinds of change you are more comfortable with or less comfortable with. And once you're having a bit of a, awareness on your preference to change, you can know then when you need to adapt or how you need to adapt more. So if you know you're usually very inflexible, you may want to just try and, you know, try go outside of your comfort zone a little bit and experiment a little bit more. Whereas if you know that you can be very flexible and you really love change and agility and you're very, very flexible, you may want to try and slow things down and know when to kind of stand your ground or stick with your convictions. That kind of ties in with what we mentioned there about, that balancing act, about striking that. Um, but another way, again, pretty simple way of practicing this is just trying something a little bit different. Taking a different route to work, trying a new idea, a new action. Looking out for someone to be the devil's advocate to say, okay, what's wrong with this idea? Maybe I should try it a different way. Because as we said, when we're dealing with so much change and uncertainty, we're dealing with brand new problems and the solution might not exist yet. So if we stick to what we've always done, it might be holding us back. Just looking at the comments there, and Matthias, yeah, you're putting in about being too flexible. I know you're in Norway and you were saying that the youngest employees tend to have this, they say jump, you say how high attitude, and say yes too much. So that can be really difficult, especially when you're new in a company or like that. You say you're the youngest employees, you're thinking, okay, I really need to prove myself. And, the way to do that is to just do what everyone is telling me to do. So it can be a really, tricky balance to strike there. Okay, so that is that piece on flexibility. The next skill then was empathy. So, why is this important? Well, curiosity and empathy are really important skills when it comes to managing diversity and creating an inclusive environment. So, being able to recognize that, okay, I see the world one way and every other person sees it a completely different way. And when you notice those differences, just saying, okay, I'd like to learn more about that rather than judging it. Empathy can help us create psychological safety as well in a team. And that's a climate in which people feel comfortable to speak their minds and be themselves without worrying about being blamed or ridiculed or embarrassed, if they make a mistake. And when we have that kind of environment, it allows for creativity and innovation. So again, we're trying new things, coming up with new ideas to adapt to the future. So people will be less worried about taking interpersonal risks and trying new things if we know that we're coming into a group of empathetic people in a psychologically safe team. And also, it's about understanding customers as well. If we are more focused on what we want, we'll miss what our customers want. And if we're not listening to them, we're going to, you know, fall behind our competitors. So I think sometimes with empathy, sometimes people think of it as, oh, you're just sort of agreeing with everyone and being really nice to everyone. But I wouldn't say that's the case. Empathy isn't endorsement. It's not about agreeing with someone. You don't have to like the person or agree with them to use this skill of empathy. And it's also not something that should be substituted for a focus on results. I think that the two should work alongside each other, that you do care about people and you do care about results. So I think using empathy alongside, fair measures of performance and clear targets will help employees to succeed. Um, Potential downside or danger here or pitfall with this skill is that empathy can be really tiring. It can be draining to be feeling the emotions of others. There is that potential for us to be worn down. And, from talking to a lot of managers, they're kind of saying, how do I kind of switch off from, how do I show my team that I care, without
Yeah,
draining myself.
that's actually very interesting because if it gets to a point where one individual is overburdening the team with their concerns,
Hmm.
which might be in their eyes a big concern, but like to everybody else, possibly not. So,
Hmm.
s- how do you manage that then? What is the approach? Is there like, okay, this is the benchmark and anything above or below this, so how do you manage that?
Yeah, I suppose it is very much, a case by case. It really depends. I think though a big part of it is kind of allowing the space to really just listen to the person. Um, because I think often, if they're dealing with whatever challenges, you know, giving that space to kind of go, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm not distracted, I'm not judging, I'm not trying to solve your problem for you. I'm literally just sitting here listening. And showing that there is that connection can help the person begin to help themselves
to
through
to
the
talk
problem.
out the particular issue or whatever the problem is. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is like it is definitely a challenge that I think a lot of managers would
Mm,
have, in terms
I
of
think so, yeah.
where do you draw the line, or
Especially
how
when
do
you're
you.
when you're dealing with different personality types, it could be, yeah. Okay.
Exactly, yeah,
It's a tricky one, all right. I think it's
yeah,
probably something that comes with experience, maybe
yeah,
over time. Yeah, yeah.
definitely, yeah, with practice and
Practice, exactly, yeah.
yeah, the more people you work with as well, the more you figure out, okay, everyone's going to react a little
That's
bit
true.
differently.
That is true. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Okay.
I do think though, yeah, once you kind of have shown that connection and the person feels that you have their back, you know, I think you can kind of drive forward a bit easier, because if the person thinks, right, all they care about is results, they don't care about me as a person, they may be more inclined to kind of push back and say, right, I'm not doing it then, or I'm not, kind of turning away from the manager. Whereas if that
Mm,
manager has shown, that they're empathetic, they're listening, they care about the person, it can kind of come
yeah.
from a good or a better place then of saying,
And it comes
I
back to
know
the
you can do
culture then,
better.
really, doesn't it? Yeah.
Mm,
So
absolutely, yeah.
and it's building that culture, isn't it, really?
Exactly,
Of,
yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just looking in the comments then as well, Matthias. There's some good points there of you can be empathetic and still create results. I think there is a connection between personal well-being and results achieved. If you feel that you're not seen or respected, how can your performance improve? Exactly. What's the incentive of, working really hard if a person doesn't even really notice, like maybe your manager or your leader. Um, and another comment then, I think that's where you use empathy. Would you consider that topic as big if it were you, after knowing what is their stakeholders' objectives? Yeah. So yeah, it is a tricky one, of kind of, because again, like sometimes someone else will be dealing with something and I might look at it and think that doesn't seem like that big of a deal. I wonder why they're, so upset or so, worried about it. But again, I suppose you just never know that person's perspective, because like fully, they could have had a really similar example in their last job, and they're that built up a lot of fear from it, or maybe they just have something else completely different, completely outside of work going on that you don't know about. So it's sometimes you're looking at it thinking, okay, well, that's now how I would react. But I suppose that skill of empathy is being able to go, and that's fine. We're reacting completely differently, and sort of allowing them to react a little bit and work through it, kind of giving them a bit of space to do that. Because usually, if we try to say, well, that's not how I would respond, or this is what you need to do, it doesn't really encourage that sort of autonomy. But yeah, so this is a a big topic. There's, I think it is definitely one that I think all of us can work on. And if we were working on it, just a couple of ways of doing that is, reminding ourselves of trying to have curiosity rather than judgment. So again, it could be with people, it could be even with a new technology, it could be, say, if you're working with someone with a cultural difference or a different language, you might recognize that they see the world very differently to you, and then saying that that's okay. You don't have to agree with them, you don't have to fully understand them, but you can just aim to be curious, be non-judgmental. Second point then is to practice active listening. This is where you're really putting the other person first, trying to pause that natural instinct that we all have to evaluate or make a judgment or give advice or solve the problem. So it's trying to pause that natural instinct that we all kind of have, but rather than just being with the person. So say for example, if someone tells you something difficult, you might want to say, oh well, don't worry, because this will be fine for all these reasons, and you're gonna do great and you're gonna solve this problem. That's nice, it's reassuring, but sometimes what can be even more valuable is just saying, oh wow, like you sound like you're really fed up, that sounds really tough, and just sort of letting them know that you're there, because rarely will your response change that difficult situation. So what makes it better is feeling the connection and feeling heard. Okay, so that's empathy. If anyone has any questions or comments on anything so far on flexibility and empathy, pop them into the chat. um, Steve's asking, can we train empathy? I would say definitely yes. I think that with all of these skills, yeah, there may be some natural preferences or natural instincts, with some people naturally being very empathetic and some people not so much. But I do think that it is a skill and it is a habit. Like if I've never played hockey, if I start playing hockey today, probably won't be very good at it. People will probably be able to tell that I don't really play hockey, but over time, with more practice, it'll just become a bit more natural and a bit more comfortable to me. So I think I would just see these as a really similar, mindset, that it is just a case of practicing and using these skills. So going on then just to self-awareness. Why is this important? Well, I suppose if we understand our emotions, we can understand a little bit more about what's going on around us. Emotions are data, they give us information about what is happening around us. Um, if you are aware of your values, you're aware of, what's most important to you, that can help you guide you through difficult times. And it'll allow you to lead with authenticity. So being aware of yourself can help you, be true to that. Um, Now, we did mention as well earlier that there is that sort of authenticity paradox where, sometimes people feel I need to choose between being a fraud or being a failure, because this is what my environment requires, but this is what comes naturally to me. So it is that really tricky kind of paradox, but um, I suppose it's just, you know, something to be mindful of is using this skill alongside flexibility. Um, so I suppose a possible downside of this is being very self-aware and sticking rigidly to that, kind of going, this is who I am, take it or leave it, rather than, trying to meet people in the middle or think win-win. So as I said, it works well with flexibility. Um, I think another potential downside is, trying really hard to be self-aware and being constantly sort of introspecting and really constantly, reflecting and thinking, okay, how does that align with my identity or my values? Sometimes we can fall into that trap of sort of overthinking it. So it is something to be mindful of, that it's great to have self-awareness. It's great to reflect, it's great to know your own sort of triggers, what you like and what you don't like, without trying to fall into a trap of over analyzing oneself. um, so this does, I think, require reflection, and often in our busy day-to-day lives we're on autopilot a bit. We can react without being really conscious of it. So it's about noticing there, okay, why did I respond in that way? What led to that? So in terms of developing this, a couple of ways would be just paying attention in the moment on purpose. Some people on the call may practice mindfulness, or some people might hate the thought of mindfulness or hate the idea of it. I know some people have a bit of a, they dislike the idea of it, but if that's you and you're not a big fan of meditating, it's literally just paying attention. That could be mindful eating or going for a walk where you're not really listening to anything, you're just in that moment. Or just stopping and looking out the window and noticing something that you've never seen before. Just pausing for a moment rather than going from one thing to the next, going from these external stimuli. Um, so it's just about, noticing in the moment, okay, how am I feeling? And where's that feeling coming from? Um, if you feel that you want to improve your emotional self-awareness and maybe you don't really have the language to do that, one thing you could do is use numbers. So say on a scale of 1 to 10, how is your energy? Right? So 1 being very low energy, 10 being really energetic. So where would you put your energy? And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable or pleasant is your mood? With 10 being really comfortable, really pleasant, 1 being obviously very negative. So say if you were saying, okay, my energy is really low, I'm at a 2, but my, you know, mood is more on the unpleasant side. So I'm at 2 on that. That's probably a feeling of sadness. But if you were high energy and high, pleasant mood, that might be that more excited or elated. If you were high energy and it was an unpleasant mood, it would probably be more like anger. And if you're low energy but it's a more pleasant mood, probably just content. Right? So there's different ways of just pausing and reflecting. You might not have the vocabulary to describe every single feeling or differentiate between the subtleties between emotions, but you can still reflect and think, okay, where am I right now? Where's my energy? Where's my mood? Um, So just looking at Matthias's point there, being too self-aware may mean you do more harm than good for you. Yeah, sometimes it's if you're too conscious of it. So you can't please everyone, and if you continuously adapt to what others expect from you, you'll lose yourself, definitely. So taking constructive feedback into account and adopting the most essential ideas from this, you can develop in a healthy, constructive way. Yeah, absolutely. I'd really agree with that, Matthias. Yeah, so there is those two aspects of self-awareness, the kind of internal and the external. How do you kind of knowing how you present to other people and then knowing what's going on beneath the surface, like. So as you can see there, that's one of the points is get feedback. Are there people whose opinions you value? And it's not even that their opinion is right or wrong, um, but it's just knowing how am I currently being seen? Is that how I want to be seen? Is there anything I need to do to close that gap between how I'd like to be and how other people are seeing me? Um, I think feedback is quite important, especially from people that you know and respect, because sometimes our self-awareness is formed or our opinion of ourselves is influenced quite a lot by maybe outdated information. Maybe a teacher in school said something to us, or a playground bully said something to us, and that kind of shapes how we see ourselves. So getting up to date feedback is really valuable. Going on then to the next skill, which is problem solving. So in this age of information that we're in, we have access to so much info. It's so readily available. Not all of it is accurate or true. So we need to be able to kind of sift through it and make sense of the world and recognize that we have our own biases and we have our own emotions, which will color how we interpret information. We see the world as we are, not as it is. And so we need to be able to adapt and learn. A potential pitfall here to be mindful of is, if you have this as a well-developed skill, you may sometimes jump straight into problem solving mode. You might say, okay, I know what to do. I'm going to start implementing solutions. And maybe you haven't fully surveyed the situation. Maybe you don't fully understand it. Maybe it's a brand new situation. Maybe if you've solved a similar problem in the past, you think I can just apply the same solutions. But again, in this complex world, the future problems we're dealing with might not be the same as what we're currently dealing with. It might look similar, but it might be a little bit different. So it's just something to be mindful of. Another thing to be mindful of here is that we sometimes do confuse good outcomes with good decision making. and vice versa. If things maybe it just didn't work out because of bad luck, and we think, oh, I made a bad decision. So this skill, it's more about focusing on the process and not solely focusing on the outcome. Um, so then how to develop it? Well, one strategy is to know when to rethink. So when we're making a decision or solving a problem, often we'll have to revisit it at some stage, but we want to be able to kind of make a decision in a timely fashion. So what you can think of is how important and how reversible is the decision. If it is very important and the consequences can't be reversed, you need to do all the rethinking upfront. So you need to put in the time and effort to analyze, okay, what might this mean? How am I going to solve this problem? But if you had a decision or a problem that is less important, maybe it only really affects you and no one else, maybe the consequences aren't very permanent, then what you could do is make the decision, quickly enough, and then use hindsight to redo it if necessary. So that can sometimes help people if they either are making decisions very impulsively or if they find they're being a bit too indecisive. So it's just thinking, okay, how important, how reversible is this? Do I need to do all the rethinking before I make the decision? Or can I make the decision and then go back and change it and use hindsight? Another point here is to remind yourself that you're not completely objective. Your way of seeing a problem is just one way, and it is influenced by your emotions, your experiences, your biases. A third strategy there, it sounds simple, but just take the time to clearly outline possible options for your decision can be helpful, again, for personal or professional problems. So if we lack confidence about our decision, we think, oh, I'm going to worry about the consequences, or I'm, worried I'm going to make the wrong decision. If we've paused, taken the time to just create a list, we can then come back to it and reassure ourselves that we made the best possible decision at that time with the information available to us. And again, it helps us avoid that bias of confusing good outcomes with good decision making. We can have that list and say, yeah, this was a good process, or maybe this wasn't as much of a good problem solving process. Okay, and then we move on to the fifth skill, which is optimism. I think optimism helps you future proof yourself because it allows you to believe that things are possible. And without that, it's difficult to get through challenges. Optimism is not about being naive or seeing the world through rose-tinted glasses. It's more about, believing something is possible and persevering through the hard times. Um, a possible downside is that sort of blind optimism, not assessing threats or risks and being seen as someone who's a bit of a dreamer, they've got their head in the clouds, they're not realistic. I think it's great to have optimism and a hopeful vision, but making sure as well that you, are doing things that are focusing on things that are still within your control and within your influence, and that there is some grounding in reality. So how do we develop this? One is noticing your language. So think about the way that you talk about something. If you're saying, I could never do that, or I'll always be this way, and that's just who I am, that's always the way I'm going to be. That kind of all or nothing thinking can be holding you back. Like if you're thinking about yourself and saying, I'm very unlucky, nothing ever goes my way, just noticing that and saying, okay, how else could I phrase that? Is that helpful to phrase it that way? If something didn't work in the past, what can you do differently then this time? And also remembering that nothing is permanent. Any emotion or hardship or difficulty that you go through is transient and it will change. Everything good will change as well, but everything, anything good or bad, nothing is going to stay the exact same forever. So that can be just reminding yourself that if this is the worst case scenario that you're working through, it will be different in the future. Okay. So those are the 5 skills that I would say are really important in terms of future-proofing yourself, I'd like to invite you, just if you have, a piece of paper beside you, maybe pick one of these skills. Which one of those five jumped out at you as being the most important or interesting? And if you were to give yourself a score on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being really highly skilled, 1 meaning you never really use this skill, where would you place yourself? So, say, for example, if you're picking, you know, flexibility, if you're saying, okay, yeah, some of the time I'm able to be flexible, I'll give myself a 5 out of 10. And think about, what would it look like then if you were up 1 point on the scale? So, if you gave yourself a 5, what would a 6 look like? What would you be doing differently if you were at a 6? What would other people notice about you if you improved that skill just a little bit? And then thinking, what are some tiny steps that you might like to get there, to get that up, just up one? Doesn't have to be perfect, just up a tiny bit. Um, if anyone would like to share their small steps or ideas that they're taking from today, that they think, yeah, I'd like to start doing that. It doesn't have to be a drastic change. It could just be, tomorrow I'm going to go in and I'm going to, really listen in a conversation with a colleague. Just one conversation. Yeah, I'm going to try that out and see what happens. So if you do have any small steps that you'd like to share, pop them into the chat. And Marie, thanks for sharing that. That you're saying, yeah, optimism, self-awareness being ones that you're most interested in, giving yourself a 7. So you could think to yourself, okay, well, if I was at an 8, what would that look like? What would I be doing differently? That's perfect. Yeah. So I'll you can pop your ideas into the chat if you have them. I can send you out this sheet. So this really just summarizes what I spoke about for the last 50 minutes. Summarizes it into one sheet. So we have each of those 5 skills, a couple of potential strategies, and you can give yourself a rating of, on a scale of 1 to 10, and then what would it look like if you were up 1 on the scales. Right, you're thinking, could do with working on empathy. Yeah, absolutely. I think we all definitely could. I think it's something that, you know, we often, think, oh yeah, that person's really difficult and I just don't see eye to eye with them. And then they go into the, every interaction thinking, oh, they're really difficult, as if that person wakes up and chooses to be, a nightmare, like wants to be difficult just for you. I think it's, if we treat them with empathy, we listen to them and swapped out that judgment for curiosity, I think we'd probably be surprised with the changes that we would see in them. So there's a shared folder that I'll be sending out afterwards with the recording, so I can make that available to you. So I just wanted to say, very briefly, when it comes to emotional intelligence, as you probably have gathered, there's no kind of silver bullet and there's no one size fits all. I can't really say, oh, just do these 3 things and then it'll improve. Everyone has their different strengths, different environments. One strategy might work for one person, it might not work for another. So it's up to you to decide, if you want to work on these, what kinds of steps might work for you. I think sometimes that can be a bit discouraging for people, to kind of going, okay, can you just tell me what to do, or how do I do this? And there is, I suppose we've covered a few tips and techniques. But if anyone does want to even chat about this further, I can make my Calendly link available and we can have like a more of a chat. And I also just wanted to signpost as well that we have a emotional intelligence program. So it is a leadership development program, but it is actually applicable even if you don't have people reporting to you directly. So we've run this a couple of times in the past, and some people had a larger team, some people maybe just had one person, some people were looking to grow their team in the future. So there are different options. You can do live online workshops with a group, or you can do self-paced learning and then have a couple of one-to-one calls with myself in a kind of coaching and development capacity. If you are interested, we'll just pop those links into the chat. And the next group program is it's starting on the 15th of September. So we have a few different dates on the website, but it's designed in a way that allows you to fit it into your busy schedule. So, it's held on Zoom, half-day workshops, 1 day a week for 3 weeks. So we'll just pop the link into that in case you are interested, in case you're feeling, yeah, this is something that I want to work on, or maybe my, few of my team members or a few of my, fellow managers or leaders want to work on, or if you're thinking, okay, I need to sort of future-proof myself or go one step beyond in terms of developing these, you can feel free to get in touch if that's of interest to you. So if anyone has any questions, please pop them into the chat. I will just, as I'm waiting for those questions or comments to come in, I'll just highlight that our next event is on the 24th of August. So this is the process side of it. So in Buzzwords, we have the people and the process. This session is a people session, and then the next one is a process one. So this is about process mapping. So in every business, you have processes, whether they're good or bad, whether they are recorded or not. So if you're ever going to improve any processes, the first step is really to understand what's happening. So we'll have the master lean black belts, Stuart Nelson, Kasia Olafs, and Eamon McKenna, and they will be sharing tools and tips for process mapping, identifying what the process is, the potential pitfalls, and then discussing how to make it look pretty as well. So we'll put the link to that in the chat also. And then our September session is going to be a combination of people and process. So we're focusing on building a lean culture, discussing how you can measure and manage your culture. So that is pretty much it in terms of my side of things. So I'm just going to have a quick look and see if there are any questions or comments coming into the chat. Good to see if people found it informative and helpful. Yeah, I can see, Matthias, you're putting your ideas in there, which is great. You'd add one point that leadership. Yeah, I think these skills really tie in with moving from management towards leadership, of really engaging and including and collaborating with people. Yeah, I've seen people debating it. Yeah, convinced that this change will be an integral point when planning the future of work. Thank you very much for sharing that. Brilliant. Good to see lots of familiar faces. That's brilliant. So if you are interested in any of the things that I mentioned there, the Emotional Intelligence Leadership Development Program, the upcoming complementary Buzzwords sessions, anything like that, feel free to drop me an email, message me on LinkedIn. You're more than welcome. I'd be happy to have a chat there. So I don't think there's any questions. So I'm going to hang on for another couple of minutes just in case anyone does have any questions. But that is all from me then. So looking forward to seeing a lot of you hopefully again in the future.